2, 3, 4. Put the pieces down, stopped and looked around. I found a place for me where I could lay my head comfortably. And I rested there for time. I found peace of mind. I dreamed of what could be. I heard the call of life deep in me. I rose up off that bed, stood on my feet and said, I'm heading for the light. Felt that warm sun burning bright. And it's a new day, and it's a new way, and it's a fine sight. The warm sun burning so bright. And I climbed a little hill, sat in the quiet till a meadowlark sang a tune, and the sun warmed me through and through. And I'm finally free of the doubt. One chance to change is now. I'm letting love take control, guide me on my way home. And it's a new day, and it's a new way, and it's a fine sight. The warm sun burning so bright, and my love knows where my heart should go. And it feels just right. The warm sun burning so bright. It's a new day, and it's a new way, and it's a fine sight. The warm sun burning so bright. I feel that warm sun burning so bright.
Okay, today we're looking at the everlasting arms. And this is actually based on a talk I gave with the series I did on Emilie Cady from her book Lessons in Truth, and I draw from that on occasion because it's my spiritual roots. I keep going back to it and that particular book, and still find a lot of meaning in it, which is kind of unusual for a book. You know, we're often influenced by certain writings, and then we, as we go along, we look at them again, and maybe they don't mean quite as much to us at a later time. And I have gone through phases in looking at this work, and actually everything that I've read, I have at times questioned it. I have looked at it, from a different perspective, but I always find that grain of truth in her writings that I find is one of my foundations. She's one of my foundational authors, one of my gurus or sages or whatever you want to call her. She would not probably care for any of those terms. But it's important that we also do what she talked about doing, and that is eventually give up all the books and turn directly to our inner teacher. That's the whole point. And I have said many times, when you're ordained in any particular religion, and I'm ordained in the philosophy, I prefer to call it, of unity, I never got from the founders that I was to pick up their thoughts and say, here's the truth. The thing that has always attracted me is not so much what they say as what they do. And I think that that's the desire of any spiritual teacher, is to get the student to do the things they do, not parrot what they say. And you'll see that most religions are based on parroting what somebody else said. I think when Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me, that's kind of what he was saying. Learn to have your own experience. Because if we don't, we're not really empowered. If we don't know what this thing we call God is, if we're not worshiping the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, and soul, you really can't worship the God of another with your whole mind, heart, and soul. You just can't do it. But the moment you begin having spiritual awakenings, spiritual experiences, mystical experiences, it becomes yours. It becomes your path. And that's what we always want. And so we come back to this idea of what is God? What is this thing we call God? And to me, it helps to look at that again, because we go down this road and we easily revert to the idea that God is this powerful old man in the sky. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But what does it mean to live and move and have your being in God? How does that translate into whatever it is you're going through at this moment in your life? If it's a challenge, or if it's, if you're at a place you don't know where to go or how to handle it, do we revert to that begging and beseeching to get that being to act on our behalf? Do we revert to that old type of prayer? Or do we seek to align ourselves with what is true of the behavior of God at this moment, which is absolute freedom? So we want to keep dusting off our belief system, our knowingness. We want to come back to that place of knowing, that place where we know. And how do you know when you're in the presence of God, when your mind is broken through to that center of power? You know by the peace that you feel. When we are struggling, when we're not at peace, it's because we're drawing from our own resources. And by that, I don't mean our own perception of our resources, I should say. A limited power. When we drop down into that experience of oneness with God, God becomes our power then. It's not our power, it's God power. And we're strengthened by that. We're strengthened with new insight, with new enthusiasm, with new life, with new intelligence. We see things from a higher perspective. Sometimes we might call that our second wind. We get our second wind. We've all been there. We've all been in situations where we felt overwhelmed, and we reach the point where we let go. And it is in that letting go that you're able to fall into that net of God, in a sense, to open your mind to that greater one presence and one power. And otherwise, it's just a head thing, and that's not good enough. It's good enough a lot of times, because that's what a lot of positive thinking literature is grounded on. It's keeping our attitude positive. And all of us, wouldn't we rather have a positive attitude than a negative attitude? We feel better when we feel positive. But what if we're feeling positive and something comes and jerks the carpet out? Where do we go from there? it's difficult to maintain that sense of positive. But there's a deeper level, and that deeper level is God, and God is always positive. It's not positive and negative. One presence, one power. It's always positive, always working on our behalf for the highest good of all. And the head doesn't get that always. So we let go, we trust that deeper. And it's not so much a matter of trusting as a knowing. You know, the trusting thing is blind faith. And that's better than no faith. Cady talks about this too, the difference between blind faith and knowing. And we want to move into that knowing, that's direct experience. And that's what we have to, why we keep wanting to remind ourselves of this. But she talks about God as the substance, and that word is a combination of two, sub, under, and stare, to stand, or the real thing standing under every visible form of life, love, intelligence, or power. So God is that stuff, that substance, that energy, the real thing standing under every visible form of life, love, intelligence, or power. And you've heard me talk a lot about those four qualities, those four elements. I spend quite a bit of time in my book, The Complete Soul. And got that basically from Cady, but also from other people. When you look at all the literature, what are the qualities of God? They pretty much narrow it down to these four: life, love, intelligence, and power. These are descriptors. They're fundamental elements of that one reality. She says, each rock, tree, animal, every visible thing is a manifestation of the one Spirit, God, differing only in degree of manifestation. And each of the numberless modes of manifestation or individualities, however insignificant, contains the whole. And she's not here saying that everything is the allness of God. You wouldn't say the earthworm, for example, has the same level of intelligence as the average human being, although sometimes. But the human being has a larger aperture to express that intelligence. It's like looking through a hole in a fence. You know, you have a little hole that lets a little bit of light through, and then you have a larger hole that lets more light through. It's all one light. It's the same light, but expressed in different ways. So if we think of creation, you know, us, animals, plants, all the things, even rocks, you know, everything is energy. But a rock is, you know, you say somebody's as dumb as a rock, you know, which is, we say that sometimes. It doesn't mean a rock does not have intelligence in it. Because when you have a mystical experience, you will see that everything around you is alive. But the rock expresses a different level of intelligence. It expresses the intelligence it needs to be a rock. And that's, again, back to the earthworm. The earthworm is exactly adapted in terms of intelligence, expression of intelligence, to that environment that it lives in. Most of us wouldn't know how to do that because we don't even think in that way. But all the animals, and that's, I think, what Jesus was talking about, the birds of the air and all that, they have the aperture that opens up to the intelligence that allows them to successfully live in that place that they occupy. And the human being has a larger aperture, and it's so large that we invent problems, which animals don't do. But we have this ability to imagine and to create problems that animals just don't have. And Jesus is kind of saying, you know, why do you worry about things? Because it doesn't add even a cubit to your life, to your, doesn't solve any problems. as I say, I have the answer to that. We worry only about the things we can do nothing about. So it's an imagination. It's an activity of imagination. And we are called upon to come back to our home, to our spiritual center, where the source of life is. And that re-empowers us. It gives us new vision, new intelligence, life, love, power, intelligence. It infuses us in new ways. And we are shifting from the notion that God is a human-like figure who resides in the sky to the understanding that God permeates and sustains all life. And that's a big step for all of us. It's much easier to think of God as an entity outside of yourself, as that old man in the sky when you need help, because it feels like, well, if God was here, why would I need help in the first place? So we say God must not be here, and we cast our attention to another place outside, trying to influence. God, please, give me something I don't have. Give me more life. Give me more love. Give me more power. Give me more intelligence. I don't know what to do. And so we're called upon to rethink this. Is God that old man in the sky? Is that who I'm praying to? And it's just something we all ask ourselves. You know, that's what this whole journey is about, is constantly taking a spiritual inventory. Constantly looking at, comparing, am I pulling from the past, from my past perceptions, or am I pulling from what I know now is true? And do I know what I know? Do I really know that? Am I aware? Or is that a philosophy? Is that an idea that I'm carrying around in my head? And that's what a lot of religion is. It's memorizing. I like what I read or heard, and so I'm going to keep that. I'm going to pin that on my refrigerator. And when you pin it on your refrigerator, does that mean you've got it? Finally, I've got it. It's on my refrigerator. I like reminders. I had Beth do a embroidery, whatever you call that, where you write words in thread with thread, from Emma Curtis Hopkins. He who hath led me to this way, still on the way will show. He who hath taught me of this way, still more will make me know. And so I had her do that, and it's on my computer desk. And I like to be reminded of truths like this, because why would we be brought to this point in life if we were not able to go further? Why would we be brought to this point in life where everything stops? We don't have the answer again to take the next step. And so we say to the old man in the sky, I'm missing something here and I need it. I need some help. But Hopkins is saying that which has brought you to this point will continue to carry you on. Just, I think, a very important reminder to have. So Jesus said, or this thought is attributed to Jesus. The scholars doubt that he actually said it, but I like it anyway. And I'm going to pretend like he said it. The hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such the Father seeks to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. This to me is an example of that mystical thread. It's a pretty profound statement. He's talking to the woman at the well, if you remember, the Samaritan woman. And she believed that God was, the center of divine power was in the Samaritan temple, which no longer existed apparently in that particular time. But the Samaritans believed in their temple, which was on the mountain where the well was. And compared it to the temple in Jerusalem. And so Jesus said the time is coming when you will neither look at that temple or the one in Jerusalem. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. Does that sound like a reference to the old man in the sky? It sounds like a mystical opening, that we must approach God as spirit through the inner channel of our own spirit. So I think that's interesting. The hour is coming, and now is. The true worshipers. That's what we're being called to become, the true worshipers. And when you think of the old worshipers, the way it used to be in our thinking or whatever, you have this deity and you have this altar and you come and you make your sacrifices. And what does that do? In our old thinking, it changes the way the Creator behaves. Hopefully, if he accepts your sacrifice. That's the whole idea. But what if you say, I am that sacrifice? I am the offering. I am the open channel through which you express yourself right now. That's the true worshiper, worshiping in spirit. The Spirit of God is that which is in us, and we are in it. In him we live and move and have our being. And we have to use the pronoun, or we do use the pronoun just because there's no other way to describe it. There are ways to describe it, but this comes from a masculine-oriented culture. So this is not a new idea, because clear back in Deuteronomy, the eternal God is your dwelling place. And again, how does that sound like an old man in the sky? The eternal God is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. We've all sung the song, sang the song about the everlasting arms. We used to sing in the Baptist church. I can't remember it now, but it's the idea that, God is holding everything, and the old man in the sky has got everything under control. But that means something so much different to me now. Underneath are the everlasting arms, that which upholds us. It's the spiritual foundation. You see, the things that we battle, we're not only battling this mentally in religion, but we are battling it in science, because science does not say the eternal God is your dwelling place. And underneath are the everlasting arms. It says underneath all creation is materiality. And that's the difference. I was looking at, again, the creation story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's religion. Science says no. In the beginning, there was this little particle, smaller than an atom. And one day it exploded. And that became everything that we see. So all life, all intelligence, all the galaxies, billions and billions of stars, all came from this thing smaller than an atom. Now, if you were looking at these two creation stories side by side, which one would you find easier to believe? I don't embrace the Big Bang Theory. I do not believe that life came from reality. How can life come from carbon? And all the things that the basic elements. How can an intelligent being rise from that? Science says, well, we can't tell you either, but it just did. Well, the Bible says God just did it. They're answering the same question with the same answer. We don't know how it did it. And the Bible, and I'm not saying that I embrace the Bible view either, but what I do believe is in the beginning God. There is this underlying reality. and we call it God. You can call it whatever you want. And science is moving closer and closer. That's one of the values of the near-death research, is they're saying, how can a person die on a operating table and their consciousness can see their body if we are a product of the brain? It's reductionist materialism. So we're battling this whole thing from two fronts, science and religion. And people say, will science and religion ever come together? In this regard, no, they won't, because they have two different foundations. One is spirit, one is materiality. Those will never come together. It's like the two rails of a train track. It looks like sometime in the future they'll come together. But just keep walking down that railroad track and they never do. Because they're coming from two separate places. And of course, science is looking deeper and deeper into matter and saying matter is not really matter at all. It's energy. And a few of them are beginning to say, Eastern religions might have had something here. There could have been something that we're overlooking in our scientific approach. So that's not even worth arguing, because you're either a materialist or you are a believer in spirit. There's no sense in arguing the two. But it doesn't stop us. But we're going to not worry about that for now. But that's what and you see, when you think about the writer of Genesis, that first chapter of Genesis, how would he possibly know what happened in the beginning? He's making a statement based on his mystical understanding. But we can ask the same question of the scientists. How could they possibly know what happened in the beginning? They do all their calculations. The Big Bang theory is a mathematical theory. It's a theory. And there was these two guys that had this scope of some kind, that they were able to hear this static, and they finally decided that it's the remnant of the Big Bang, when it first occurred. That's the only way they can explain it. So that's proof, they say, that happened. What I think that is, it's a sound of God laughing. But I don't have proof of that either, but I'm no different than they are. You can call it whatever you want. And it's very impressive. Science is extremely impressive. I'm not at all putting that down. But there is a level of arrogance in religion and science, both, that does not allow us to take another look. And so we need to take another look. To think of God as our dwelling place and ourselves as being upheld and guided by God's presence opens our mind to this truth. We take a more peaceful, centered approach to our life. And that would be in opposition to thinking of God as the old man in the sky, something separate from you, and you have to earn the right to get the answer you want. If you already know that you have it, because you live in the fullness of God now, that nothing will be created by your asking. The only thing that will change is your eyes will be opened a little more, your spiritual eyes. That is the word prayer, slatha, to make an adjustment. That's so appropriate for all of this. And I've compared this to the stereogram. You know what those are. You look at this picture, it's a squiggly and all this stuff, and then you have to kind of relax your eyes, and pretty soon a shark appears, or something appears, another thing that you didn't know. You have to learn to see that with a different kind of vision. It's not the normal vision. So to me, that's always been a good illustration of how can we live and move and have our being in God and not see it. We haven't learned to see it yet. And we don't see it with the eye. We see it with the soul. We see it intuitively. The intuition is the mind's eye, or the imagination is the mind's eye, and those two things are very connected. But we don't see it with our normal vision. See, that's why people stand around saying, when's the kingdom going to come? And it doesn't come with observation. It's just like looking at the stereogram. It doesn't, the image won't come through observation. Like you can look, really concentrate your vision. And the harder you try, the further you'll get from it. You can't see it. But you relax, and I can't explain. I can see these things, but I can't explain how. What happens in my eyes. It's sort of like you put your finger in front of your eyes and you see one if you're looking right at it, but if you relax, you'll see two fingers. It's the same principle. There's the way that thing is designed, and whoever did it came up with that had nothing else to do in life, I guess. So the truth that God is your ever-present substance opens your mind to the fields ready for harvest right now. The same is true of health. God is your present source of health. And do we really believe this? This is a question that we all have to ask ourselves. Do we really believe this? The healing energy of God that God is works in and through your mind and body now. Do we believe this? The spiritual questions that are raised are always directed to us. I don't raise them to you only for you to think about what I'm raising. Because I bring on a Sunday morning usually something I've been thinking about all week. Some challenge I'm dealing with. How do I tell others ways to deal with this from a spiritual perspective? So the statement, I live in God and God lives in me. I live in God and God lives in me. Let's say that together. I live in God and God lives in me. Just kind of hold that thought through this week because it's pretty powerful. Speak these words when you're alone, quietly when you are with others, while you're out on your walk, driving your car, alone in your meditative setting. Do not reach out to God, reach in. Wherever you are in life, God is. Isn't that what we say in our closing prayer? And wherever you are doesn't mean physically. Wherever you are, you could be terrified at this moment. God is there. Wherever you are. Open your mind to God's prospering, healing presence. All right? We're getting better and better all the time, aren't we? Thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it. Good seeing you. Keep holding this church up so we can keep having it.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.